I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, November 13th, 2017, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Hillman, there was just a few personnel items in the table file.
Yes, that is correct. Just a handful of personnel items for the board's consideration this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing no one come.
We got someone
Oh,
raising
I'm sorry. Please step to the podium, please, and we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and please state your name and address, and if you represent a group.
I do not represent a group.
Okay.
My name is Jana Hirsch. My address is 1401 Cannon Valley Drive, and we have kids at Greenvale and here at the high school. The reason I'm here is that I have been a volunteer at Greenvale for the past 3 years, approximately 3 times a week. I would say I'm there about 8 hours a week. First of all, your staff there is amazing, so I'm just going to start with that. I love everyone there. I do have a concern, having been working with some of the kids in reading, about the I Imagine program that they've been working on, that they're on a screen for approximately 20 minutes a day. As I'm developing relationships with some of these kids and sitting with them and doing their reading, they're talking to me about how they're going home and they're being on a screen for another 3-4 hours a day. And so it's just something that I guess I want us to be thoughtful about. I'm not anti-technology. I don't want my kids to be like the Flintstones or anything like that. I think it's great when they can do their math and their flashcards and things like that on the iPads, but when there's this sort of reward system that some evidence has shown will sort of decrease their attention span. It's a really bright, colorful picture. It gives you rewards for reading sentences and prizes at the end. It just seems to be something that's not working, especially for my kids and my kids' brain. And so I'm not a specialist, and I don't claim to be, but I guess I just maybe wanted people to be aware of it and maybe thoughtful about it as you guys were thinking about if you were going to continue with it or have it next year or something like that. That's really all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize I didn't read the preface to public comments, but this is actually a listening opportunity for the board and not an opportunity to debate.
Totally
no, I just wanted you to understand why we would.
Absolutely,
I didn't want you to think we weren't responding to your.
No, actually, don't need a response at all. Like I almost didn't get up and say this anyway, so I'm cool.
Okay, it's good. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming forward and sharing your concern. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packets minutes of the regular school board meeting held on Monday, October 23rd, 2017. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Ellen. Any discussion or comments regarding the minutes? Okay. All those, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the regular school board meeting held on Monday, October 23rd, 2017, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Well, and good evening. And for the first one this evening, I'd like to ask Heidi Cunningham, the Community Education Director from Farmington, to please come to the microphone to present a very special award.
Good evening, Northfield School Board, staff, Superintendent Hillman, and community. My name is Heidi Cunningham, Director of Community Education for Farmington Area Schools, and I'm also the board representative on the Minnesota Community Education Association. We'll call that MCEA, much shorter as I speak here. But I am really proud and excited to be with you this evening to be able to honor your community service Director, Erin Bailey, as the Region 5 Community Educator of Excellence this year for 2017. Erin was nominated by her colleagues in Region 5, which consists of 11 school districts, most throughout Dakota County and South Washington County. So she's got some big competition there if you think about the size of some of the schools that we're talking about. Anyway, Erin is a representative of the excellence in leadership in MCEA. She always exhibits a willingness to take risks and possesses strong communication skills, is a progressive change agent, and has high expectations of herself and others. And I work with Erin quite a bit through MCEA, but also we are all involved in the Dakota Prairie Adult Basic Education Consortium together. So we work often on that, and I have to say I couldn't ask for someone that I enjoy working with more than Erin. She's great. I just wanted to thank you for your time, too, as Erin participates in the Minnesota Community Ed Association. Her involvement has included serving on as the Region 5 representative to the board from 2012 through 2015. While on the board, Erin developed the MCEA mentoring experience and matched 41 MCEA mentors and mentees in the initial first 6 months of the program. Additional contributions to MCEA she's presented at conferences, she's been on conference committees, and locally, Erin is proud of the work she has done transforming a high-needs school into a community school, with 95% of students participating in the after-school program. That's huge. So at this time, I would like to thank Erin and congratulate her on being awarded Region 5's Community Educator of Excellence for 2017.
Heidi, thank you very much for coming, and we agree. Congratulations to Erin. We're very proud of her hard work, and we're just happy MCEA noticed because we've known these things for a long time. So thank you to the organization for recognizing its members. We know how important that is to talk with folks about when we have people who are doing an exemplary job to recognize that good work. So thanks for doing that, Heidi, and thank your organization on behalf of our district.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have two other announcements this evening. We just have a lot of people who are recognized for their outstanding work, and this is no exception. So we want to congratulate high school business education teacher Julie Woolner for receiving the Outstanding Secondary Educator Award that was awarded by the Minnesota Association of Career and Technical Education Administrators. And Mrs. Woolner received that award at their annual conference on November 1st. And so we congratulate Mrs. Woolner again, just another outstanding representative of the Northfield Public Schools. And as we know that one of our focuses on students being career and college ready, the fact that one of our own was recognized as one of the best in the state, again, shows our commitment to having high quality people in place to help us pursue our strategic plan near-term priorities.
We're all taking a look at it.
We're okay, taking a look at it. Very
Admiring
good.
it. Very cool.
And they spelled your name right. That's always a good thing. Yes. Also, we want to remind board members that as part of American Education Week, the Retired Educators Luncheon is this Wednesday. Board members should have received an invitation from Heather Kahinka in the Community Services Office. And then the Staff Appreciation Breakfast is on Wednesday, November 22nd at Northfield Middle School. Breakfast will be served from 7 a.m. until 7:45 a.m. The program begins at 8. The program will recognize people for 20, 25, 30, and 35 years of service. And the Northfield Education Association will also present the honorees for Friend of Education, Education Assistant of the Year, and Teacher of the Year awards. And again, you should have received an invitation from Heather, and the deadline for making a reservation for that event is this Wednesday. So, those are your announcements for this evening.
Excellent. Board members, other announcements or recognitions that you have? I just had a couple. Noel Stratmon and I were able to go to, and Dr. Hillman was there as well, the annual Veterans Day program at Bridgewater. it's become a long-standing tradition at Bridgewater, and once again, just a really wonderful event. And it was so interesting. I was happened to be driving over to the event, and one of the DJs on one of the morning talk shows was mentioning, oh, it's Veterans Day, and he talked about growing up in Pipestone, Minnesota, and remembering Veterans Day, and seeing all of the servicemen there. And so that they're in the moment, and they're learning and experiencing and having that feeling, but to know that it extends into their adulthood where they will reflect back on that day, I thought was pretty cool. So we hope our students will have that same experience. But anyway, so thanks to Nancy for always doing such an amazing job with that day. And we know it was great because the weather was good, so a lot of veterans were able to go. I think last year there was snow and it was kind of a dicey morning, so the weather cooperated, and there was a lot of veterans from our community there, so it was really good. And then, of course, we would be remiss in not commenting on the fabulous performances these past 2 weekends. The Drowsy Chaperone by our drama team was just absolutely amazing, and I think we always, I think it's an example where I think about community ed and the amazing job that Erin does, and how our community just sort of takes things like that for granted, and I think our community takes our drama for granted as well, and we just really do such an amazing job. And Bob Gregory, Bjorklund, and Sari Setchel, I mean, just absolutely amazing people. But what always strikes me when I'm there is the amount of parent support that we have for those performances, because we literally could not do sets and costumes and concessions and everything that it takes to put a performance on like that. So we really have to thank our entire community who really come together and make sure that those performances are just outstanding. So we thank all those people. So good stuff. Yes, Rob.
Well, I hope this is okay, but I just wanted to take a minute to just remember Ray Cox, the former school board member. He was a school board member from 1985 to 2000, who passed away 2 weeks ago. I just feel he had a huge impact on the community as a whole and on individual members of the community. And he's one of those people that you can say, I didn't always agree with him, but you absolutely respected him and knew that he was a good person. And all the conversations we ever had, even when there were things we disagreed about, were fabulous. And I think he's really going to be missed in this community.
Well said, Rob. Thank you.
And Mr. Cox served, I believe, 15 years on the school board, and had a really important part in many major decisions that were made during his time. So thank you, Rob, for sharing that and making sure that we recognized his service to the community, not only through his role on the school board, but again, his time in the state legislature and those kinds of things as well. And we thank him and his family for his service.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob, for your comments there. Okay, so is there anything else anyone would like to add? Okay. We'll move forward then with, we have no items for discussion and report this evening, so we'll move forward with the items for individual action, the first being resolution canvassing the results of the special election. Dr. Hillman, did you have any comments just prior to making the motion?
Well, I think that we should go ahead and make the motion,
Okay.
and then we can make,
Okay,
and this is, of
that's
course,
good.
is the standard practice after an election. But I think we should go ahead and do
Yep.
the motion, then we can do it during the discussion
Okay, good.
part.
Okay, so I would ask, is there a motion to adopt the resolution canvassing returns of the votes of the school district special election held on November 7th, 2017 on the question of revoke the existing referendum revenue authorization of the school district and replacing that authorization with a new authorization for taxes payable in 2018 thereafter? Question 1, of which 4,085 voted in favor and 3,831 voted against the same. Said proposition, having received the approval of at least a majority of such votes, is hereby declared to have carried. Just a point of clarification, Danita, we would like these as two separate motions?
That's correct.
Okay, so we have the first motion regarding question 1. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Amy. Okay, so any discussion or comments then relating to this motion?
I think we'll save all the comments for the
Sounds
second
good.
motion, so we can just
Okay.
have one if that
Sounds
makes
good.
sense.
Let's move forward then. This is a roll call vote.
Correct. Gruitz. Aye.
Hardy.
Aye.
Iverson.
Aye.
Pennell.
Aye.
Stratmore.
Aye.
Pritchard.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Secondly then, is there a motion to adopt the resolution canvassing returns of the votes of the school district special election held November 17th, 2017 on the question of authorizing the issuance of school building bonds for a school acquisition and betterment program, of which 3,467 voted in favor and 4,436 voted against the same. The passage of School District Question 2 is contingent upon the passage of School District Question 1. Question 1 having carried and Question 2 having not received the approval of at least a majority of such votes, Question 2 is hereby declared to have failed. Is there a motion to, do I have a motion? Moved by Noel, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rob. Okay, we will take now questions or comments relating to canvassing the results of the special election. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Dr. Hillman?
Yeah, I would just like to say a couple of pieces and then potentially suggest an action moving forward. In terms of, we just want to start off by expressing our incredible gratitude to the community and the voters for approving the operating levy. When I say hundreds, I literally mean hundreds of school districts in the state would be so pleased to have our operating levy at $1,967.32. It's almost like I said that a couple of times. We were just so grateful to have that for us, because that really solidifies our ability to maintain student programming at the highest level. And we know people in our community truly value our staff. They really provide the services that our staff provide to students. And I think that approving, the operating levy for the maximum amount allowed by law, for the longest term allowed by law, 10 years, and including the inflationary factor, so that we get some kind of inflationary increase each year for at least the operating levy, shows the value that our community puts on our programming and, most importantly, our students. And so I couldn't be more grateful for the success of the operating levy. And then, of course, we're disappointed in the outcome of the bond election. We'd not be telling the truth if we didn't say we weren't disappointed. But I've said this a few times, and what is so great is that this is if you really think about it, this is the last instance of direct democracy, probably in a lot of places. It goes back to the beginnings of democracy, where a question to the community is put on the table. People come to the town square, in this case it's their voting precinct, and they say yay or nay. It's usually we're electing representatives to do those things for us. It's one of the last instances of direct democracy, and it's, for a history major, it's always thrilling regardless of the outcome. But at the same time, we saw democracy in action, and the voters were clear that they did not agree with the package that we put before them in terms of how we presented this iteration of bringing the master facilities plan to the voters. And so, as the duly elected members of the school board and as your representative, as the superintendent, it's our job to listen to that and to really then take the next step of saying, okay, this was feedback, as Noel has said, it's a question to the community. The community answers the question, and in this case, they answered us and told us that we weren't quite ready yet. So what I would humbly recommend the board consider is a work session sometime in the next few weeks for us to have an opportunity to solely focus on what the results of the bond election, how we can infer that meaning in terms of how we would move ahead with implementing the master facilities plan. So it's just something that I hope board members would consider. I would suggest thinking about December 4th. It's a Monday prior to us really getting into the holiday season too much, and we can do a poll on this afterwards and make the announcements. But before it gets too far away from us and before we get into the holiday season, I think it's important that we take a chance to come together in a work session, to discuss what we learned from this particular election, and then look at what are the potential next steps for us to take, really reflecting upon what the voters told us in that democracy in action.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I saw what appeared to be an agreement on the value of a work session. If then maybe Danita, if you can send out an email tomorrow, just say to reply is December 4th, a workable date for people. Just a reminder, we do only have one board meeting in December, so I agree prior to the holiday break, it will be good to have that work session. And I would recommend then the other work sessions, we began at 5, so that seemed to work. And we wouldn't, I would imagine, need more than 2 hours.
No,
and
we would
maybe
limit
less.
it to, we would limit it to, the most we would ever go would be 2 hours, because we know that we're gonna start on time and certainly end on time, if not before. You're right, it might not take us 2 hours, but I think so that people can plan the rest of their evening, 5 to 7 is what I would recommend as well.
So so then Danita will send that out, and we will plan 5 to 7 on Monday, December 4th. We do want all board members to be there, so if that date doesn't work, we'll suggest some other dates within that time frame of that week, or possibly the week after. And then we'll start generating agenda for that work session. And as people have input on what they would like us to be able to cover, please let us know. Ellen?
So, yeah, that was what my question was going to
Yeah.
be. So when we have one board meeting before the December 4th, so I didn't know in terms of crafting how work session would look like. So just let you know, Julie, if there are specific things that we think would be useful, rather than taking our November 27th, where you're just going to take our input and then sort of think about what would those 2 hours look like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think that sounds good.
I see, Val.
Yes, Val?
We do have a finance advisory committee meeting that day till 5:30.
Okay.
So could we do 5:30 to 7:30?
Sure.
Would that be possible?
Is the group amenable to 5:30 to 7:30? I apologize for that.
That's
Val.
okay.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully that's a date that's workable for everyone once they check their calendars.
And if not, we'll come back with another date.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we can surface a draft agenda.
Absolutely.
And give people the opportunity to look at that and be sure that within, that time period, we're really getting at the questions and topics that we really want to delve into for that session. So, any other questions or comments board members have about the election before we move on?
You have a motion on the table.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, again, I thank all board members for their participation in the information campaign. I know all of you attended meetings at various points and really appreciated our effort to be able to get people the information that they needed, which I think was shown. We had probably one of the highest voter turnouts in the state at 47% of eligible voters participating. So I think we should be real proud of the information campaign and all of the work that folks did, before the election. We can't not thank Danita for all of the great work that she did in terms of preparing those pieces, and Val Murdesdorf, who did all the really heavy lifting on those precincts that we were responsible for. And so again, thanks to Danita and Val for their incredibly hard work, and to the board and all the other folks who really helped us make sure that people had the information that they needed to make an informed decision. And at 47%, voter turnout, again, I think if you look around the region, you saw people far less than that. So we got the information out, which was a good piece.
If
And
I may
Danita,
just,
yes, please.
Clarify, 47% of the registered voters as of 7 a.m. on.
That's correct.
Not of the eligible,
Of the registered eligible voters. Thank you for that clarification.
Well, and I think as a board, we certainly understand and echo Dr. Hillman's comments about how, incredibly grateful we are that the operating levy is now in place and we have the financial stability. And, we're on a very positive trajectory here and we can move forward. And I think as board members, we always appreciate the opportunity to engage with the community. And I don't think we ever have an opportunity other than possibly, in an election where we're running for school board, but to be out in the community as much as we were was really gratifying. And we got to really hear firsthand how people were thinking. And I think we always had the opportunity that we don't always have one-on-one to explain some of the challenges that we have in the district and to learn from them in terms of, their expectations. And we're in a community that has extremely high expectations for their schools, and for us to be able to interact since August with community members. And we know that the turnout shows that they took this very seriously. And so we're really grateful for those that took the time to understand the issue and to ask the questions and to read the materials. And we can't ask for more than that. And at the end of the day, their voice was heard. And I think about where we are in terms of as a district having to, have the conversation around operating levy, but a bond is really a conversation this community doesn't have often about our facilities. And prior to that, it was 2 decades before. It was 1995 when the question came before their voters around Bridgewater in the middle school. So, and prior to that, it was 2 decades before that. So, in over 4 decades, we've only had that conversation really twice. And so there's a lot of, I think, understanding that community, has to get their head around in terms of how facilities have to support learning and what our facilities needs are. And it's not a conversation we have often, and we're in a place now where we've begun that conversation, and we know we can move forward and continue to, to address our facilities and do what we're elected to do, and that's, in keeping with the best interest of students. And we know the need has not gone away, but we understand where the community's at, and we'll move forward. And I'm really looking forward to the work session. We'll be able to start moving forward and get some direction once we've really understood what our community has said. So good. So we'll hope that date works, and if not, we'll get another one, and we'll have that time within the next couple of weeks. So back to the motion and canvassing the results. We have a motion and a second, and that second motion, we still need to do a roll call vote. Is that correct, Anita?
Gurwitz.
Okay. Aye.
Hardy.
Aye.
Iverson.
Aye.
Quinnell.
Aye.
Stratmore.
Aye.
Pritchard.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, excellent. Next item for individual action is the Dundas Dome lease agreement for 2018. Dr. Hillman?
Yes, I think if we can get a motion, in a second to approve them. We also have Tom Groutman here to talk about it a little bit.
Excellent. So is there a motion to approve the lease agreement with the Dundas Dome for the time period of January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. Okay.
And if, Tom, can I have you come to the microphone, please? So, as you know, we completed our first lease with the Dundas Dome this last year. It was the first year that the facility was opened. We've had a lot of positive commentary about the use of the Dundas Dome, but as we brought this forward, normally with a lease renewal like this, we would typically do it on the consent agenda. So if you think about the Northfield Gymnastics Club, you think about things with the ice arena, you think those kinds of things typically, once they've been approved, typically come back for renewal on the consent agenda. But because this was new, and because it was a new facility in our community that the schools were able to participate and take part in, we wanted to share a little bit, and Tom's just going to share a few things with you so that you can ask any questions as well.
Good evening. I thought it would be best to get testimonials from the people that were actually there instead of just the AD who gets to see things from the, well, in this case, in the inside. So I'll start with head football coach Bubba Sullivan. These are comments directly from these folks. We were able to use the dome once this year. It was late this fall on a terribly cold, wet, and rainy day. It was great to be able to use the dome as our kids and coaches were able to focus on preparation and developing their skills and schemes as opposed to just battling the weather and trying to get off the field as soon as possible. You're going to like this next piece. Our use of the Dundas Dome fits well with the district's vision to provide a world-class learning environment with a commitment to community partnerships. And a quote from one of our football players. Practicing in the Dundas Dome was fun. The better conditions actually allowed us to concentrate on football as opposed to focusing on the conditions and the weather. From head coach Troy Coors. Track. We were able to use it once during inclement weather for boys and girls track, roughly 85 student athletes. It was amazing to have that space at our disposal. It provided training for sprinters and distance for that hour, and we got a lot of quality work done. Student athletes love being in that space. From head baseball coach Mark Auger. It allowed me to see kids at all levels, 9 through 12 at one time. Kids get more thorough evaluation before team selection. Players were able to throw greater distance, which leads to better arm conditioning. We set up baseball fields with like dimensions. It prepared us more for early season competitions. And the best of all, kids had fun. And a quote from one of the baseball players, the dome is great to practice in. It provides enough space to work in ideal conditions, like comfortable temperature and no wind. So when the conditions outside don't allow practice, the dome does. From boys lacrosse, head coach Gunnar Olson. The boys lacrosse season is so short, normally lasting only 8 weeks. So bad weather and poor field conditions would often take away 10 to 15% of our practices each year. Now with the Dundas Dome available for use, we can reclaim that practice time and keep our athletes on the field during the season. Even if it's just for 45 minutes to an hour, the use of that facility has made a huge difference in the development of our players. And a quote from lacrosse players. I believe that the Dundas Dome is helpful to our team because it gives us the opportunity to practice and not miss a day when the weather is poor. Every day counts in such a short season. The Dundas Dome gives us a way to practice in the rain or cold without hurting ourselves or the field. From head softball coach Ryan Peach, the Dundas Dome is a complete game changer for our high school softball program. It provides us the opportunity to practice and do things that are impossible to perform in a gymnasium, such as working on live pitching and fielding, working on cuts and relays, working on fly balls, practicing live situations and base running, scrimmaging both inter-squad and versus other schools. The girls truly enjoyed coming to practice in the Dome. The Northfield High School softball team would love to be able to utilize the Dundas Dome again this spring, if possible. Thanks for considering. And from a softball player who's near and dear to our hearts. The Northfield Fast Pitch softball team agrees that having access to the Dundas Dome has been a great asset to our practices. We have been able to have full team scrimmages, practice pop fly drills, and have enough space to complete tasks we wouldn't be able to do in the gym. And then from me, as the activities director, the Dundas Dome management, the folks that I got to work with, were really good. They were organized. We worked out a really good schedule. And the schedule that we used, we fully used that asset. We had teams share the facility at times. We had a whole program take the facility at times. So we tried to get the best bang for our buck when we were at that facility. The billing that we received from them, I think, Val, that seemed to work well for our district as well. The other piece that's really important is transportation, and our activities shuttle, the after-school shuttle, was definitely able to stay within the time frame and get our student athletes to practices by 3:30. We normally try to start at 3:30, sometimes a little bit later, and within that time frame, the activities bus was able to operate. The other kind of residually good effect would be the fact that as we're using the Dundas Dome, we're also using other indoor facilities, which then in turn enables us to get our kids done with practices sooner, getting them home, getting them to do their homework, getting them to be with their families. So there are a lot of benefits from utilizing the Dundas Dome. The other thing that we see now too in spring sports, because of the addition of lacrosse boys and girls and clay target, has now jumped ahead as far as student enrollment when it comes to participation in a season. It's jumped ahead just slightly of winter sports. So getting all these kids involved in something and engaging them in something so positive and having this asset was beneficial for our co-curricular program.
Excellent. Questions or comments? Rob?
I'm just wondering about the impact it may have had on the condition of Memorial Field. That, I mean, one of the rationales was that doesn't have to be used so early in the spring, so that then, the turf will be in better shape. So has that turned out?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just Memorial Field, but other practice facility as well. And even that one boys lacrosse player that I cited in here recognized that it saves on the fields too, because we're at that Dundas Dome and we're not always on that turf. And we try to rotate around, we try to move our people around a little bit so we're not always pounding the same turf. But it certainly has saved on the turf. Memorial Field to some extent too. We're still playing our varsity games at Memorial Field. We didn't play any lacrosse games at the Dundas Dome last year. That doesn't mean we won't this year. It just worked out where it wasn't either available the day that we needed it or we just didn't need it.
Amy?
My daughter's in lacrosse, and she got to use it several times last year at the beginning of the season, and it really did make a difference for that team to get started and not having to be out in the inclement weather. My question is, how does the billing work? Is it billed per hour per use? And so we get a bill each month for how many hours were actually used?
Do you want to address that, Val, or do you want me to?
You can, since your mic's already on if you want.
I'll try to start, jump in as needed. We are billed. We're billed at $450 an hour. The billing, it's my understanding, came at the very end, and we were billed in one bill. I believe that we used about 50 hours last spring of our 90. And again, the lease reads very clearly that we will not exceed 90, but we don't need to use all 90. So last spring, again, I think I really were good stewards with the amount of time that we used the Dundas Dome.
Other questions or
I think
comments?
Bill's gonna.
Oh, I was
Oh, I'm
just going
sorry.
to add that the bill was at the end of the spring season, so I think it was like in May that we received the bill, and we'll probably get another one probably in the next month or so for any time that we use this fall. So twice a year billing.
No? Oh,
Rob's got one.
well, Rob had already,
Yeah, I'd already-
I had already asked one, so if you had one, I was going to ask
Are we
you
talking about
to-
the lease
Yes.
at the moment?
Yes.
Or are we still on the, yeah. I have a question regarding the renewal, and maybe I haven't read it properly, but it appears that you need to provide 6 months' notice to decide what to do. But you can modify the lease with only 1 month's notice. So it seems to me you could say, yes, I'd like to have the lease for another 12 months. But you wouldn't necessarily know what the modifications would be to that lease because they could be delayed until the very last month. Have
I
read
guess
it
I'd
wrong?
want to take a look at that before I would answer that
I understand.
question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think that I can certainly help out with it. I think this is pretty standard lease terminology, Noel, which means that if we're going to end the lease, we would need to notify them 6 months, which would be July 1,
Yes.
if you think about it. So the bulk of the Dundas Dome experience, I think is fair to say, will always be in the spring. You know, while we will use it from time to time in the fall, it's mostly going to be used in the spring. So if there was a circumstance where we wanted to end the lease, you know, starting with the next year, we would need to make that decision by July 1, which is, we talked about that when we originally signed the lease, that's perfectly appropriate in terms of the amount of time, you know, between the end of the spring sports season and the renewal of that lease. So I think it's relatively standard, you know, lease notification pieces. And I think that since we're using it mostly for spring sports, if we had a concern about it, we would say at the end of the spring sports season, we don't think that we're going to want to use it for the following year. And make that notification. That would still allow us to come back and renegotiate something else. There'd be nothing wrong with doing that. But I do believe that the time frame is I don't have a concern about the time frame, Noel, because I think we're going to know pretty easily as to, you know, when we're into spring sports, what any concern that we would have about it would be.
Does that mean that we need to actually physically agree to a renewal by June or July 1st?
No, it does not. What it simply
it's-
says is that it would automatically renew for the following year if we don't let them know by July 1. That's how I'm reading it.
But it makes the assumption that we would agree to the lease for another year.
That is correct. And
So we probably should actually renew it.
Well, I think that what we would need to do is have that, we can certainly have that discussion, you know, at the June board meeting or to be able to make any decision on that. I think the key thing is the administrative team would be our job to come to you if we had concerns about not renewing it.
It might also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead,
I
Tom.
don't want to.
Go ahead.
All right. Dr. Hillman alluded to the fact that most of our use is in the spring. The reason for that, and maybe you all know, but there's an ordinance that the Dundas Dome is under saying it's got to shut down for a certain period of time. So I don't know the exact day that it shut down or closed last spring, but I know they opened it back up on like November 1st, and that's when they could start again. So that's the reason why our fall sports don't have as much use as what our spring sports would have. Because virtually by November 1st or 2nd or 3rd, we are done with our outside fall sports.
Ellen?
So this is piggybacking on what Noel had originally asked. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and then Dr. Hillman, you had said in the future this is going to be part of the consent grouping. So I'm imagining that it would be part of the consent grouping again, late in the next year, like about a year from now, as a consent grouping. And the only reason we would see it in the summer is if we decided to terminate it, in which case it would not be a consent grouping. We'd probably want to discuss it.
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So once, depending on how we decide to go on this motion, it's likely this would just be part of our consent grouping to vote on in a year. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, other questions or comments? Rob?
This is just to help my memory. Last year when we did the lease, did we pay them a lump sum for a certain number of hours? Or did
No.
we pay them per hour?
Per hour,
So it
correct.
was the same lease?
It's the
Because there
exact-
was something I remember about hours rolling over, and there's nothing about that in this lease. So is that, could you explain if that's going to happen or how that works? Because if you're just paying for hours up to 90 hours, then I don't understand the rollover part of it.
So I think that's a great question. Last year, the number that we brought totals to you because we wanted you to know what the total potential payment would be. It was our first time, so we were sharing it. If you remember, we shared with you the number of hours we thought we would use it. I think we were even on a per week basis in the spring, and then shared with you what that total lump would be. But as we've done it, of course, we know that we've been billed twice so far, once so far, because we would get billed every other month. But Valentine, do you want to talk a little bit about that concept of not using all the hours versus rollover?
Sure. So the contract runs January through December. So we had up to 90 hours, and they billed us in the spring for our actual hours. So whatever was remaining, we could use this fall from when they open through December 31st is what I think the intent of the carryover was, just from the time that they were open and then closed and then open again within that January 1st through December 31st period. But we are only billed actual. So
Okay.
we're saying we could have up to this amount, but thus far I think we've been billed for about half of it. So
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I just wanted to thank Tom for your leadership in putting this together. I mean, in my view, the Dundas Dome is just a huge community asset, and I love that one of the coaches pointed to community partnerships, and I know that the Dome brings in a lot of people from the surrounding communities, and our businesses are hopefully benefiting when their kids are practicing. And I know I've talked to a couple parents actually from a little bit north, and they said, oh yeah, we always go, and they list off 3 favorite restaurants in Northfield that they come when their kids are practicing. So we appreciate your leadership there. And the reason, again, we brought you forward or have you here tonight is just because last year was new. And so I kind of looked back on some of the things that we talked about last year, and you really touched on all of them. And it really has come to fruition in terms of how well this program has worked, because we talked about optimal practice times, which, you've said indicated how the bus service was going to work, how the coaches were going to work together in getting all of the sports to be able to have opportunity for time. Just the hours, you're going to be judicious in terms of the hours, and we certainly saw that coming in at 50 when there was potential for more. So we understand that you're the good stewardship you have in terms of that. So I think everything that we really were not concerned about, but really trying to understand how it would work, has really obviously come together and has been really successful. So we really appreciate your leadership in making that happen. So, yes, Rob.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was just thinking this might be the last time that you stand up there and present to us, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for all your service to the school district, and I've really enjoyed the conversations you and I have had together about things like artificial turf and things like that, which are always fun to talk about. But I really, and you know, going back to when I subbed for you when you were a sixth grade teacher, so you've been a great member of this community of educators, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Noel, you have a comment?
I'm still uncomfortable with the renewal language. Let me try it one more time. It seems to me, now, it's a 12-month lease, so I'm going to use the months. We need to say by July if we're going to say yes or no. But they can tell in December that the rent doubled. And be within the language of the contract. Am I misreading something?
Val, can you help me with that one, please?
I'm just rereading the paragraph here. So it does say unless either party provides a 6-month advance written notice or at least 1 month. So I think both parties would have to agree to that. I don't think they could do that unilaterally. So if they were going to come back and double the rent,
Is that an interpretation, or is that language that a slick lawyer could discover?
well, I also think as a public school district, we have other outs that we could use should they choose to do that. They, like Tom said, they've been great to work with, so I don't anticipate that.
My issue is I don't want to be locked into a contract that we say yes, and only to find out at the 11th month that the rent doubled.
Yep.
So if that's not possible,
Well, and I think
I'm okay.
I would argue, while I'm not a lawyer yet, I learned that I should have become one instead of getting a doctorate. But I think the key thing in when I think about the controlling language in the renewal section,
Yeah.
it talks about or at least 1 month's advance written notice of modification to the current agreement. When I think of the word advanced, that means I can only tell you for things moving forward. Right, so advanced notification. So what is done. The terms are very clearly laid out in terms of the cost per hour. And if there was a modification of that, it would be an advanced, moving forward. And I agree with Val's interpretation that it clearly says the other controlling language of both parties, unless either party provides the 6 months advance notice of the modification to the agreement. So I believe we've got 2 safeties. Number 1, when I apply the reasonable person theory, they've outlined how much money it is per hour, number 1. Number 2, they've identified that it's advance written notice, so it's not going in arrears. It's not saying that it can be retroactive. It's saying advanced notice, which means things that are going ahead in a plain reading of the language. And finally, I think the other piece is that we have a relatively good microphone at our disposal, and if we were to enter into a contract with someone who, let's just say it was another vendor, and they were to try to change the rules at the end, I think that we have we're a pretty good reference for people, and I don't see a vendor wanting to have, because we would have to talk about that here publicly, that I don't see a vendor wanting to put themselves in that circumstance, just from the practical perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. Prior to the motion, is there any other questions or comments? Okay, just to recap, there's a motion to approve the lease agreement with the Dundas Stone for the time period of January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Tom. Okay, we will move on then to our last item for individual action. I think we'll do the motion, and then we can talk about the activities we have planned around the American Education Week. So I'd like to read the proclamation. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and a broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And whereas education employees, be they custodians or teachers, bus drivers or educational assistants, office employees or administrators, work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas schools are community linchpins, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise. Now, therefore, the Northfield Public Schools Board of Education does hereby proclaim November 13 through 17, 2017 as the 96th annual observation of American Education Week. With that said, is there a motion to approve the American Education Week proclamation as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Rob. Is there a second? Second by Amy. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Hillman, would you like to outline the events going on in the district
Sure.
to celebrate this week?
Yeah, as we mentioned in the announcement section, just reminding folks that the Retired Educators Luncheon is this Wednesday, November 15th at Ruth's on Stafford. And can you remind me the time, Erin?
11:30.
Doors open at 11:30. We'll start serving at noon.
Okay, very good. So again, new location this year, so make sure that we remind people that we're having the Retired Educators Luncheon at a new location, and so we're excited to see Ruth's on Stafford. Retired Educators Luncheon is such a great time. It's so fun to watch colleagues who work together get to come back together and catch up, and I think that these folks get together from time to time, but we have a record number actually registered this year.
Yeah, we do have a record number, so if you, as a board member, are planning to come and have not RSVP'd, if you can let me know tonight, just so we have enough.
I think it's over 100, correct?
We're sitting at 111 right now, so which
That's
is about,
awesome.
Yeah, we're about 30 over where we usually are. So if you would like to come, you're certainly welcome. If you could just let me know tonight or early tomorrow, that'd be great.
Again, thrilling to bring back people who have, who gave their entire career to students, and to have a chance to see them catch up with each other and reminisce is just, it's always very gratifying to me. Staff Appreciation Breakfast, November 22nd at Northfield Middle School, and again, we're going to include the recognition of those employees who've reached the years of service that I mentioned before. And then, of course, the NEA's presentation of the Teacher of the Year, the Education Assistant of the Year, and Friends of Education Awards. And it's just, again, a great highlight of the year to recognize our staff. Of course, I want staff to feel recognized every single day, because it's not just, one day a year where we recognize this, but our staff do such a great job every day serving the needs of kids. But at this time of the year, we take a time out and say thank you very much for your service in a more formal way.
Excellent. Well said. We could not agree more. Okay, excellent. So that does take care of items for individual action. We'll move now to the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were just a few personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from consent grouping? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Noel. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Items for information, Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so I believe that the first one on the agenda is the enrollment options report. And you have that. This is an annual piece that we provide to you to share where we are at in terms of students and their families exercising the open enrollment options or non-resident pieces that are allowed to them, and not just those pieces, but also other educational choices that families can make through charter schools, parochial, homeschool, etc. So you know that this is something I know you look forward to every year. You see those people coming in and going out. I'm going to give you the summary of a couple of things that are a little bit different this year. If you take a look at those going to non-public schools, when you go from 146 last year to 140 this year, I would call that just about a wash. When we take a look at students going to homeschool, we did see an increase in 10 families this year, and that equated in a total number of students increase of 17, going from 113 to 130. And I know people are going to ask me why people would, why that large increase in home, and the decision to homeschool is different for every single family that we work with. So there's not something that I can identify as a trend. They don't even have to provide us with a reason in terms of them choosing to homeschool. But I don't have anything to share with you in terms of why we had that level of increase this year. Again, it's an option that people choose at varying points in their student's career, and it's an option that we completely support in terms of Danita does a lot of the paperwork with that's required to be submitted. We look at charter schools, and again, we are the authorizer for our 2 wonderful charter schools in town, and we're one of only 3 school districts in the state that still authorize charter schools. And again, they're at about the same. in terms of when you look at the total numbers, 280 this year choosing charter schools versus 278 last year. When we take a look at what we'd call open enrollment in and out to traditional public school districts, what you're going to notice is that we did have an increase of students who went out this year from 182 to 189. Again, I'd call that a wash, pretty even. But when we take a look at the number of students from other school districts choosing Northfield, we have a pretty substantial increase of 97 additional students coming from outside, from a school district outside of Northfield and choosing to come to Northfield under the law. And so when we take a look at that 97 student increase, you're going to see that we increased by 50 coming from Faribault. And you'll also notice that we did have an increase of 11 students coming to us from Randolph. Now, whenever we look at this and we think about open enrollment, I really want to caution people, because when they hear that significant increase of 97 students choosing Northfield, which we think that says a lot about our programs, right? That's great that other people are choosing, because we don't provide transportation for these folks from their home community. It's their responsibility to get their students to school here. Now, if there's a safe bus stop on the border that they can drop their student at or bring it, we work with that on a case-by-case basis, because of course there's not that ability at every border in the school district, so that's a case-by-case basis. So we're really thrilled with what that says about our programs. Of course, it also can create some other issues that we have as well, but at the same time, that's only part of the story. So when we think about open enrollment and you see 411 coming in and 189 going out, we miss that first part that I mentioned to you about the non-public schools, homeschool, and charters. So we still have, at the end of the day, 739 Northfield resident students who choose something other than Northfield Public Schools as the place for the child to be educated. As we know, we are a proponent of public school choice, as we are an authorizer of charter schools. So we still only bring in about 55% of the kids who go out. So when we think about those 739 students who choose something else, their state aid funding, the money that we get for every child, goes with them. Just as with the students who come in, we get that state aid as well. So the key thing is that we are still only bringing in about little more than half the students who are choosing something else. So I absolutely understand that when people see an increase in the number of students who open enroll into our district from other districts, that can create some concern about pressure on our systems and whatnot. Perfectly understandable. However, it is only part of the story, and we are still only making up for about half the students who choose something else. So there's quite a bit of data here. We want to thank Chris Nessett, who dutifully puts this report together for us every year, and it really is fascinating to look at it and to understand where our students are going and where they're coming from. So with that, I just wanted to explain. I'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Tri-City United.
The old Montgomery Lonsdale. So when Montgomery Lonsdale paired with, now I'm drawing a blank on the name, at La Center. So when La Center and Montgomery Lonsdale paired, their new name is Tri-City United.
Rob.
So there's an increase of 5 out to the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative. That seems like a different story, because those students, there's no services for them here. So
that is true, and while those students they're from Northfield, but they are enrolling in the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative, which is its own district.
Right.
And so while this is not an open enrollment, it's a placement. That's the technical term. So yes. And you're right, that's different, and there are a few of those. For example, the Dakota County Special Ed Cooperative. They may have a program that, even with our subsec programming, that we can't provide the services for that student. So you'll see a few of those. Intermediate 287 is another one of those. There are some of those where we do not have the ability to serve that student's special needs within our school district because of the nature of the disability and because of the nature of the programming, and the IEP teams make those placements. And one of the reasons that we put the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative together was the fact that we knew that we were having a number of students who couldn't meet their needs. And so then when we send them to a place like Intermediate 287, there's a whole host of other financial implications. So by becoming part of SubSec, we have reduced some of those costs while still providing our students with special needs that high level of service that they need through a cooperative program.
So where is intermediate 287?
So that's a great, I believe it's Apple Valley.
Okay, so
Thanks for whispering in my ear.
we're responsible for the transportation, so that's one of the.
That's correct.
But not for the other students who are going out, just for the special education students.
Just for the special education students, that's correct.
Good questions, Rose. Thank you. Amy?
I'm just curious, is there really a student that commutes to Wilmer every day? Or is that somehow, can they be enrolled from Wilmer, but they're doing it at home? Or how does that work?
Well, in often cases in those circumstances, when you'll see something unique like that, there's a variety of reasons why that could happen. In some cases, it could be a situation where a family has a legal residence of the student within our district, and there's another parent, who lives in another district, and there's an agreement for that student to go to school and live with that parent in that particular case. There could be some things that make them still technically our resident student, while they may go to that other school, if that makes sense. There are a number of unique circumstances like that that often involve looking at court orders and those kinds of things. And so from time to time, we'll have some of those things. I can't tell you what that case is.
Yeah, I don't need that specific case, but I was just thinking the distance-wise did not seem to be a good commuting distance.
There's often in those cases that don't make sense to you, there's often some kind of family situation where there's a technical residence that has to remain, but the student is going to go to school in another location. And of course, that school district wants to make sure that they get the funding for that student, so that non-resident agreement or open enrollment process is taken care of.
And that's not in effect this year. That was 16, 17, Wilmer.
Right.
For
It was last year. But we do have some of those on, there is one from Grand Rapids for this year that's going out. There's always a few of those every year.
Jeff?
Just curious on some comments and laws. I'm sure this maybe happens more in the metro, but I mean, I can see from this number, it looks like you've got 6 kids going to from here to Faribault and 252 coming here. If I was a Faribault school district, I mean, I'd be kind of concerned about that number, but I'm kind of wondering, if I was in South Minneapolis, maybe I'd be more interested in going to Edina or somewhere else. I mean, when you get into, is there a limit or a law on open enrollment, or how does that work and I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just wondering,
Sure. So the way that the open enrollment law works is that school districts do have, Minnesota's open enrollment law was originally, in my analysis, was originally identified so that parents had more choice in where they could send their students to school. And so whether that be in places where there's a number of school districts that come together and I can choose, my work might be closer to another school district, or there could be some other reasons. School districts can shut down open enrollment, but there are some specific things that you need to go through to do that. You can shut it down at specific grade levels. There are some you have to use some very specific strategies to close open enrollment. And at this point, when we still are only bringing in half of the students that go out, if you think about our totals, if we have about 739 students who are resident students who choose something else, and we're bringing in about half of those students through open enrollment, those 739 students, their state aid is following them, and we're backfilling that with the open enrollment coming in. So I would be very leery at this point, to strongly consider any kind of modification to our open enrollment. At this point, I'm not saying that it's not something that, could be discussed. Of course, that's always at the will of the board. But I think the fact would be that we would be looking at saying, we still have several hundred more students who are choosing something else when compared to those who are choosing to open enroll. And so I think it's something we'll continue to keep an eye on, Jeff, and try to analyze that and be as proactive as we possibly can be in addressing the systemic needs that come from having students who open enroll into the system. At this point, the fact that we are making up for some of the lost ground, so to speak, I think is a positive thing. Of course, we have to keep our eye on it, and because my experience is open enrollment for the most part when a student, gets here, a lot of those students will stay. But that's one of the reasons we're always looking at the enrollment report every month as well, because if there was a reason that students from another district chose to go back to their home district, we want to keep close tabs on that, because that would be a significant concern for us if we are counting on those students and there's something that happens back in their home district where they choose to return. So that's why we bring the enrollment report every month, so that we can keep an eye on that pulse. That would be my analysis at this point, Jeff. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Well, and I believe in the case of elementary school, we can say, we understand you're interested in open enrolling. Here is the building you would need
That's correct.
to enroll in. So whereas maybe one particular end of town is closer, they don't always, we are able to control what particular elementary building they go to.
And we do that. We have done that in several cases. We'll explain. In fact, parents may say they request a certain building, and we have come back and said, unfortunately that grade, we're not going to be able to accommodate that for that grade level, but we can offer you a slot at this particular building in that grade level. It's not always, and there are other factors that are taken into case when we look at those things. But we have done that where we have, and sometimes, most of the time I think people still come, but once in a while someone will say, well, I'm not going to open enroll then if that's the only building that I have an option of.
Okay. Amy?
I'm just curious about Randolph, because they have 4 times as many students, our students leaving to go to Randolph as we have them coming here. And I'm wondering if that's just sort of a geographical thing where those students may be in the Northfield School District but are actually closer to the Randolph schools, or is there anything, can you have an idea why that would be such a difference?
Well, it will be pure conjecture on my part, but if you're interested in conjecture,
yes.
Okay. The key thing is I do think that what you see is you do have people who are there based upon a geographic basis, that part of the district, they're closer to Randolph than they may be to one of our schools, and that's their choice. I think the other piece is from time to time you'll see this in many more central or larger school districts. So you see it in Mankato with some of the real small school districts around there where, some families, if they grew up in a very small school system, would prefer their students to go to that small school system. And so I think in some cases people look at it and say, okay, there's a scale there that I prefer, over the community in which we live. Not uncommon in a lot of larger districts where there's some small districts on the fringe of the district's boundaries, and parents choose that because of that particular environment. And I know that has happened in previous school districts that I've worked in, and I know that it does happen here as well.
No.
There's another consideration in it, that they have the ag program.
That's true. But those students are our students, well, and that could be fair, so that there's 2 ways that you can
So
look
they
at that.
don't open enroll into the ag program. They use a chunk of the day.
That's correct for us.
Thank
Now,
you.
that being said though, there could be families that choose to open enroll into Randolph because they have the ag program and they may choose to stay the full day. But we do have a number of students who are enrolled here at the high school who go there. Of course, there's compensation paid to Randolph for that. But at the end of the day, they're still our student. We at least get a bulk of the state aid.
Thank you.
Well, in fact, it was interesting because, in meeting with some community members over the course of the last couple months, someone had asked me about that. And so I know right now we are sending about 12 students to Randolph, and it fluctuates. But that program dates way back to, I believe, the 80s when we did that partnership with Randolph. And the FFA, so they're there for the ag and the forestry. So I believe they're there for two hours. Those students do provide their own transportation to get there, but that's just been a great partnership with Randolph in providing that opportunity. And Ed Terry is an absolute
outstanding.
Amazing individual, and he just does so much work. I don't know if you often listen to Kim Radio. He will take kids to national levels with FFA. I mean, just great success. So we're super fortunate to be able to tap into that. So I do know right now the enrollment fluctuates, and we're at about, I think, 11 or 12, but we can get anywhere from that 15, 20 range as well. So.
And that's a great example of how we don't have the number of students to have a full ag program. And it's a win-win. Randolph gets our students for that portion of the day. Our students get that opportunity. And, we're always looking at how can we have partnerships that provide students with the specific coursework at the high school that they're interested in.
Excellent questions. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So as part of this as well, we just take a review of the enrollment report for November of 2017.
Yep, and as we have kind of said, we're getting to cruising altitude where you're seeing that our numbers on a monthly basis are now stabilizing, and we're seeing that right now we're at 4,010, and so it is the lowest point of the year, but within just a couple of what we've seen in the last couple of months here. So just above that 4,000 mark, which again, if you remember when we hit the 4,000 mark, that was quite a day of celebration with people really happy that we had hit that number, and we're now at 4,010. Again, very similar to what we've seen in the last couple of enrollment snapshots.
Excellent. Any questions on the enrollment report? Okay. So move on to future meetings. So a couple of notes. Our next meeting is Monday, November 27th, but note that we will begin that evening at 6 p.m. with the World's Best Workforce hearing.
6:30 p.m.
Oh, 6:30. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thanks, Danita. So we will begin Monday, November 27th at 6:30 p.m. for the World's Best Workforce hearing, and that will be held here in the High School Media Center, of which the regular school board meeting at 7 will follow that meeting on Monday, November 27th. Regular school board meeting Monday, December 11th at 7 p.m. In the Media Center, and then as we discussed, a possible work session on Monday, December 4th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., which we will confirm with everyone within the next 2 days or so. So with that, I ask for a motion that we adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.